Hello, everybody. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Global Retreat Center. I was in this room about 5 minutes ago and it was completely empty. And then I came back in and you were all here. It's like you just dropped from heaven. Very instant gathering and very beautiful gathering. Really lovely to see you all. And what an interesting evening we have in store for you this evening. I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But let me just formally welcome you to the Global Retreat Center. Is there anyone who is here for the first time? One or two? Jonah for the first time? Yeah, lovely. Special welcome to you guys. So just to give you a tiny bit of background, this house is the retreat center for the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, which has been in existence since about 1936 and has steadily grown over the years and now has about 9,000 centers, I think it is, in 120 countries across the world, speaking just about every language there is and every culture. All walks of life. It's a meditation practice called Raj Yoga meditation that is for anyone and everyone. And the Brahma Kumaris has, it's the largest spiritual organization in the world for men and women that is led by women. So that's one of the things that makes it quite distinctive. It's been affiliated to the United Nations since 1980 as a non-governmental organization. So I think that's probably enough background on the Brahma Kumaris. So let us turn to our topic for this evening, a brightly guided light. It's the near-death experience of our guest speaker. Is there anyone here who would say that they have had a near-death experience themselves? Oh, 1.5 over there. Really? Okay, so there's a good number, yeah. Or an out-of-body experience where you felt yourself floating above your body, looking down on your body. As a number of you have had that experience. So for some of you in the room, what we're going to be talking about is terrain that you're familiar with already and comfortable with. Perhaps for others of you, this is new. These are ideas that you haven't necessarily come across before, and they may challenge some of the ideas that you currently hold. And the invitation is just to come with an open mind and just let your body guide you in terms of, does this feel right for me? Does this have a ring of truth about it? Because, you know, it is a little bit different from the way we are perhaps taught about who we are and what happens to us when we die. So hopefully we will have time for a few questions at the end. We've got a lot of interesting stories to share with you this evening, but hopefully there'll be time for a few questions at the end. So do hold on to those if you find questions coming up. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to our guest speakers for this evening. First, Sister Manda, who is part of the core team who helps run this retreat center. She's been here for over 30 years, running retreats, I'd say pretty much every weekend, except for when we were closed for a recent refurbishment, which happily coincided with COVID. So we've been open for a couple of years now. And Sister Manda has been here for nearly all of those years, so she has been witness to many people's spiritual journeys over that time. So she's here representing the house. And then, of course, we have our lovely Ingrid Honkala, who I will introduce you to in a moment. But she's had not just one, not just two, but 3 near-death experiences. So I don't know whether she would count herself particularly unlucky or particularly lucky. We shall find out. But let's give a warm welcome to Ingrid and Sister Manda. If you could come and join me. Welcome, both of you. So Ingrid, you've been staying here at the Global Retreat Center for a few days. Has it been a lovely experience?
Absolutely. I'm so grateful. What a beautiful, incredible, peaceful, loving place. So thank you for having me here. Just, my heart is just booming with gratitude.
And Sister Manda, you must have seen many different people come over those 30 plus years, all of them having had different life experiences before they get here. Are you aware of anyone having come because they had a near-death experience?
I don't actually remember anyone in particular, but I know that we've had this topic before, and there have been quite a few people who have shared their experiences, but I couldn't recall them by name or face necessarily. But yeah, seen lots of journeys move on from here as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Ingrid, what about that question? You know, unusual for someone to have a near-death experience where they nearly die and leave their body and have, well, you'll share with us the experience that you had, but to have had 3, I mean, that, are you just particularly unlucky, or would you reframe that and say it's actually been a blessing for you that you had these experiences?
I would say both, probably, because although it's a blessing in many ways, it took very long time to integrate the experiences, because maybe nowadays we have become more lucky because a lot of people are sharing their experiences. And that's the reason why I share too. And through my sharings, I've even been able to help parents and children that have had these experiences. But back then, when it happened to me, early 70s, nobody understood anything about this or what was happening to this child or why things were the way they were. So it took very long time and a lot of years of silence before I could even begin to share. So in that sense, it was very difficult, but on another sense, incredible, yeah.
Because you did, we'll talk about your first experience when you were almost 3 in just a moment, but after that you did start doing drawings of people with light, auras of light around them, and your mother then kind of took you seriously and believed what you were saying. But she told you not to talk to anyone about what you were experiencing or had experienced, which is interesting. And I wonder if you feel there has been a shift now and that actually these things can be talked about more openly.
Yes, and I'm so grateful for that. And people are becoming more open. And incredibly, we can always see the pros and cons of everything. But thanks to internet, and which has connected the world, people all around the world are sharing these experiences, and we're realizing how it doesn't matter the nationality, how many commonalities between people that have had these experiences. And then we also learn from each other, and we're able to kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together. So yeah, nowadays people are able to share more freely. And one thing that has become very important now, there's organizations and also in the science and the medical community are opening, and doctors that are now working with this kind of analyzing data and writing books. So now this is being brought to hospitals, and where they're starting to bridge that gap of care with patients that were not validated. And this is helping the patients to heal faster.
So you were born and raised in Bogota, in Colombia, which is high up in the Andes. And I'm curious how someone who grew up in the Andes got to become a marine biologist. That's quite a stretch from the Andes to marine biology. How did that happen? How did that come about?
And not only like being born up there in the Andes, but my first near-death experience was drowning. Exactly. So people ask me, how could you become a marine scientist if you drown? You should be very afraid of water. But for me, drowning, I always say, brought me to see the light, despite of, the trauma and the other things that were there related to that. But for me, water became like this very important element. And when my parents brought me to see the ocean for the first time when I was 4 years old, I was just mesmerized, and I'm like, oh. And I told my mom, someday I'm going to know what is under that blanket. And when I was 5, I ran to my dad and said, when I grow up, I'm going to be a marine scientist. My dad was like, where this one got that? And then he's like, okay, that's what you want to be, that's what you will be. That was also very important, his support, saying, okay, that's what you're going to be then.
Before we talk about your experience, I'm just going to take a quick trot through your career, because I think it's important to listen to Dr. Ingrid's story in the context of her being a scientist, that this isn't just, something that has floated down from the clouds to an airy-fairy person. So Ingrid graduated in marine biology. She did a PhD in marine sciences in biological oceanography. She became a research assistant for NASA, which is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, of course. She was associate researcher for the Environmental Ministry of Colombia, along with UNESCO. She was chief of marine biology for the Colombian Navy. And as if all that wasn't enough, she worked in a war zone where people around her were being killed, and horrendous scenes, and suffered quite severe post-traumatic stress as a result of that. The good side was you met your husband on the battlefield, and you married, and you have your lovely son David. So it is quite an impressive career portfolio, and you tell me that you're also going to be doing a second PhD now in quantum physics. So, okay, not many people go back for more, but Ingrid, this all came about really as a result of your first near-death experience, which happened just before your 3rd birthday, and you were left in the care of your au pair, your nanny, and your mum and dad were going out to work, and you were playing ball across a water tank that was made out of cement, was quite wide and quite deep, and you reached forwards for the ball, and being so young you lost your balance and you fell in and started to fall, and you couldn't swim at that point. Take the story on from there. What happened next?
Well, what happened next is that I never had been in a tank or a pool, so I didn't know that if you fall in the water, you drown. So the first feeling was that absolute terror. Imagine drowning, you want to get out of this tank. And when I am in that struggle of terror, something incredible happened. And I went from that state of complete panic to absolute peace. Peace and calmness and serenity. And I didn't know what happened. All I knew is that I don't need to breathe, I don't need to get out of the tank, I don't need to do anything. And then from there, I always like to mention that a lot of contrasts happened that made me impossible to forget the experience. One, of course, the terror of drowning, but after that is like that tank was very dark. So the last thing I saw with my eyes open was darkness, the darkness of the space. And the moment I went into the space of peace and serenity, light. And it was a light that came from below, and then it was that sense of, oh, now there is light. The other big contrast was that I was hearing a lot of noise in my house. There was dogs and birds and sisters and noise. And the last thing I heard was my heart beating very loud in my head, almost like a drum, when you're very scared. Then peace. Peace came with silence. And it was such a deep and profound silence, and I call it the silence behind the silence. And even after the experience, I craved that silence. I will hide, I will look for that silence. And then what happened after is that now I'm in that silence, the light, and I started to see bubbles. And it was like, oh, bubbles. And they were surrounded by light, and it was by chasing these bubbles that I turned around and I saw my body in the water. And I had the absolute clarity, that is my body. And the other contrast that come there is that I was born as a very sick child. And all I knew for the almost 3 years of my life was sickness. I didn't know anything else. So sometimes we think, why a child would be born like that? And in my case, if I would have been born as a very healthy and in well-being and the experience happened, I might not really feel anything different. But at this moment, what do you think that happened? I looked at the body, I'm like, I'm in the state of complete well-being. And I'm like, I'm not going back there. And I had the chance to make that decision and left the body behind. And then at that moment, I'm just in the state of bliss, and I am going to move forward a little because I don't want to make it too long. But when I am just having the sense, I always say that the feeling was like going back to the womb, where you don't have to do anything. You're just being carried and done. And when I am in this state, in just a blink, I appear in the nanny's room, the maid's room, and I'm looking at her from above. And I said, oh, that's Maria. And Maria was completely unaware what is happening, and she's listening to soap operas in the radio. So since nothing happened with Maria, in another flash like that, I appear in my mom's path. And my mom didn't have a car. She was walking, and she was close to her bus station. And again, I am floating above her. And I think this is the part that, one, validates the experience, and two, I think is just the most amazing thing of all, and is that the moment I say, oh, that's Mom, she stopped. And I always like to add something very important. She had got a new job. And we are always going to feel that sense, I have to go to my new job, of course. No. One, I have to say my mom had a great intuition, and two, that she listened to that intuition. And she knew that something was happening at home with one of her babies, and she decided to turn around and run. And I'm looking at her like, oh, why Mom is running? And at that moment, I get distracted by a dog. And the moment I feel the desire, I love animals. So with this desire to be with the dog, I am with the dog. I'm like, whoa. And then I see a park. And the moment I feel that desire to be in the park, I am in the park. I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. And I started to play a game of going places. So it's like time and space as we know it, gone. And then as I am playing this game in another flash, everything here was like that. I appear in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And that was when I had that sense of like, I am home. And it was that the first time in my almost 3 years that I felt, oh, this is home. And you know, home is the sense of being welcome, embraced, cozy, good. And although I had seen my body in the water, something really interesting happened. It wasn't until this moment that I had the realization, oh, that's not me. I'm not that. And it's when I realized myself as a being of light. And it's when I started to feel the sense of being interconnected with everything. But I was still having at that moment a sense of self. But I had the sense that even that dissolved. And I went into that state of complete like interconnection. In the language I use, I always refer like a state of nothing, But to explain that, it's like people get scared with nothing. So that what I try to mean with this is like, imagine a big stadium, a huge stadium. And in the middle of the stadium is this little tiny box. And all we knew about us, all I knew about me was that little tiny box. And suddenly the box opened. And I realized nothing, because it's nothing I thought I was, but everything. It's a state of absolute wholeness. And I think this is probably the most difficult thing to explain, because I don't think there's words to explain it, but the only thing I could say is that it was a state of pure presence, consciousness. And if we're going to define it maybe with feelings, bliss. And when I am in my state of bliss there, my mom finally arrived home. And the other incredible thing, she knew exactly where to go. We lived in a big house, but she knew, and she directed herself to the back of the house. And there next to the tank was still my oldest sister, because she's trying to get me out. And then she looked at my mom and said, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. My mom jumped in the tank, got me out. She said that I was like a raggedy doll. No pulse, no breathing, my nails were blue, my lips were blue. But it comes another incredible thing. My mom worked with children, and she had been trained to do CPR for children. So whatever she knew to do, she started to do to me. But I was so disconnected from this body, from this reality, that I did not feel absolutely anything she was doing. But suddenly I felt that I had jumped from the tallest building in the world. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. And it was that sense of like, no, I resisted. And it was like I was being vacuumed back. And then I knew I was back in the body when the feelings of coldness and the lack of that expansive sense of freedom, and because the body was not feeling well, it was just like, and something else. I was very angry. And I explained that in the sense that imagine that you have a child in an amusement park and you're having all the fun in the world, and suddenly the parents say, we have to go. You don't want to go. So I was disappointed. Yes.
I mean, the way you tell the story, I can imagine some people sitting here thinking, oh, how do I get a near-death experience? Sounds pretty cool. And I wonder, we'll hear more about what happened next in a moment, but Sister Manda, just to reassure people that you don't have to nearly die to have these incredible experiences of the light. And I wonder how much of Ingrid's story resonates with you, not as someone who's had a near-death experience, but as someone who's done meditation quite intensely for 40 plus years. How much of that experience do you recognize from your own?
It's interesting that you should ask that, because as Ingrid started to relate her experience, I started to feel I have had this kind of an experience, not necessarily in the traditional way that you might think of near-death experience. But I remember when I first started meditating, really when I first started, which means I was 21 at the time. And I remember sitting in meditation, and it would be as if instantly I was no longer here. Instantly there was this feeling that I was somewhere else in a realm of light, and that only thing I could experience was a sense of deep peace and joy, to the point that my eyes would be tearing. They weren't tears of pain or sorrow, but this sense of joy and peace that I could not contain within myself. And I had that experience 9 months at that time, actually. And so did I make any effort for that experience? I didn't. All I knew that I was a soul, a spiritual being, and that I come from a home of light. You talk about light. And the only thing I was attempting to do was, I'm a soul, I'm traveling to my home of light. And that's it. And instantly I would be transported. Instantly, as if I was in another place and in that place. And so, yeah, I relate to that experience very much. I don't have all the other dramas that went on around. But definitely, I think when there is this realization that I'm a spiritual being, I'm a soul separate from the physical body, then this, I totally identify with this experience of expansiveness. Mm-hmm. When you're no longer in the confines of the physical body, then you are beyond the confines of space, time even, and you find yourself in this connected state to everything around you. And that's an incredible thing. And maybe I had it earlier on afterwards, but I didn't quite identify it as that. But as years have gone by, definitely, I mean, I have that every day, I could say, that this sense of expansiveness, this feeling of being light and being beyond the confines of this physical body. And a sense of connectedness wherever I want to be connected to, whoever I want to be connected to. Because ultimately, all are souls and all are spiritual beings, and we can catch each other's thoughts. You're talking about your mum, we can communicate with each other. And we think of communication in the way that we know it, which is with words and hearing and comprehending and all of that. But it does away with all of that. This subtle communication through thoughts and feelings doesn't involve any of that. It's just you think and the person knows, but you don't necessarily know that they know. You don't have to know, but you actually know that they heard you from the response that comes back, whenever it comes back. Yes. Whether it's in that moment or a day later or 10 days later, you kind of go, oh yeah, I did think that. So yeah, I think it's possible.
I also really like this example you gave, Ingrid, of I think of it like a matchbox in the middle of a stadium. And, we're living our everyday lives as if we were the matchbox. And actually, we are so much greater than that. And we have to make the practice to really realize that. The other really interesting aspect of your story is that you went to your au pair, your nanny, and she was just engrossed in her program, and yet your mum, she got it straight away. And isn't that interesting that the connections, the bond that we have, the love that we have, that is a real thing.
Yes.
And your mum picked that up. So after you had this experience, there's possibly some more similarities here with people who have had profound spiritual experiences, is that they start to feel that they don't really fit in anymore. They don't really have the same interest in life that everyone else seems to be interested in. And they don't really relate to themselves as being this body. And you talk about looking in the mirror and saying, that's not me. And telling people, I'm not Ingrid. And they'd say, well, who are you? And you'd say, I don't need a name. I'm just isness. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the years that followed this experience and how tough, in a way, those years were for you.
Those years were very difficult because exactly that. It was the sense I don't belong. And I would just ask God, why did you send me here with no manual?
No manual.
Yeah, I was like, it was very hard to relate because when I look at my parents, I felt the sense that they were not just my parents. I had experienced oneness, connection. For me, I felt them as my equal. So it was the sense, I became very rebellious. It was the sense, why do I have to listen to them? And also because when I looked at my body, I said, I am not this child. And it was the sense, I'm not this child. And I never felt like a child again. And when I look at other children, it was the sense I cannot connect with these people. Because to me it was, what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. And then I tried with the adults, and it was also the sense that they don't know anything either. So I felt very isolated. It was very, very difficult. And one thing that also happened after my near death is that abilities of being able to read and write and resolve mathematical problems and put together complex puzzles and pain started to develop pretty fast. And then now, even when I went to school, there was no programs for children like me. So it was like, oh, you think you know everything, you go to that corner. So imagine, even in all the different places I felt, I don't belong. But thankfully, my mom, who was an incredible human being, an incredible teacher, was able to, one, validate that the things that were happening to me were real. And then it came my grandmother, who became my spiritual teacher. So thanks to these two incredible beings in my life, I was able to kind of work it through little by little, yeah.
And you know, your grandmother living in very rural Colombia, but somehow she'd given herself a pretty full-on spiritual education, and she had you reading the Bhagavad Gita at the age of 8?
9.
9?
Yeah.
Teaching you meditation?
At 8, yeah.
At the age of 8. I mean, what a fortune to have someone like that in your life at that time. Another thing started happening to you around this time is that as you were going to sleep, you started having out-of-body experiences. And in these moments, you had, I don't know whether the right word is encounter or meetings, but you had a strong connection with what you call the beings of light. Tell me what they were and the part that these beings of light played.
Very important. I think that thanks to my mom, my grandmother, and the beings of light, I was able to cope with what was happening. So that's the other reason why I cannot forget, because people always come with this question, how can you remember? And I always say, it's like the doors for me never close. I always keep saying it's like the doors for me never close, and I have to say something about that. It's that years later, because I kept repeating that constantly. And one day, the beings of light, the teaching was like, Ingrid, of course the doors never close, because there are no doors. What we call the light, the kingdom of heaven, the Father is always here for us, always. We're the ones that due to conditioning, that due to beliefs, that due to experiences, fears, close doors and put cordons and whatever else we build around. So, but yeah, for me it was like that. I started to, after my NDE, to have out-of-body experiences. And I will be back in that realm of the light. And then in one of these journeys, one day I was surrounded by starlight figures. So I said to people, it's like if you will go at night and see the stars, imagine that, but I was in the light and they were shining in all different colors to the infinite. And then, of course, my parents told that lady to go away. They hired a new one, and I slept a lot because I wanted to be there. But since I was sleeping, she's like, oh yeah, I don't have to take care of the child, she's there. Oh, so I spent a lot of hours sleeping because I wanted to see the light and the beings of light. And in one of these journeys, one day, one of these lights that was shining in gold shaped itself into a human form. And it approached me and it touched me in the head. And it's when I said, oh, literally, you are a being of light. And from that moment, I started to feel the sense of like, oh, everything is okay. I'm not alone, everything is okay. But of course, I could not be the child that is left forever, because that's all I wanted to do. Things have to balance. So one day, I'm taking a shower, all relaxed in the shower, and a huge blue intense light shone in the bathroom. It's when I said, now the beings of light are here. And it's when I started to see them everywhere. And I started to feel the sense of home here. And I started to heal, and up to that point, I became very difficult child. I refused to eat. I didn't really want to talk. I didn't want to be with anybody. And then when I started to see them, feel them here, I started to heal. And I started to play. And at the beginning, I only could see them, smell of flowers. Oh, and I could sense their presence, but the very first time I started to hear was when I threw a big tantrum about my name. And it's when they're calling me, and I said, stop calling me, that's not my name. And they asked me, then what is your name? And I said, I don't need a name. I don't need one. Like, come on. And then it's when they sent me to bed, and it's the first time I hear a voice. Very compassionate, very loving. It's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. And of course, later I understood that names are needed in our human experience, that they carry frequency, they're beautiful, but it's when we get to understand labels are not needed in the realm of the light. And because for me, labels were never needed, so I don't need to see the beings of light with certain shape or name or nothing. If they present that way, they do, but I don't need to see them like that.
Sister Manda, if I could bring you in again here, this is touching on an aspect of sort of Brahma Kumaris teaching that we don't really talk about that much. But nonetheless, it is part of the story of the organization, and that is that there have over the years been individuals who have had the gift of traveling to this dimension of light and experiencing beings of light and coming back with messages from the light. Can you give us a handle on how you understand this phenomenon and what is going on?
It's a very beautiful thing, actually, when you can transcend time and space and physical dimension and find yourself in a realm of light, which is what Ingrid is describing also. Then there is a level of communication that happens, I feel, that is, it is not limited to situations and circumstances or even time frame. And I have met people, and there are some people even around these days who have this ability, which we call allowing their intellect to be pulled to a different dimension. And it's in that dimension that communication with evolved spiritual souls, spiritual beings, or communication with the divine can happen. And I have had experiences whereby they've come and said things to me about myself or for a situation for me or something that I should keep in mind. It's no way that they would have known that this is my situation and circumstance. But I think it's to do with purity of intent, cleanliness of the intellect, and the desire to be able to go beyond this identity of the self. If I'm caught up in the identity of my own self, then I'm going to be caught up in my own limited experiences of the past, the present, or even the people that I'm attached to or affiliated with. My own thinking becomes influenced by all of that. And then it's not possible for me to have a vision, and I don't mean vision as in a vision, but it's not possible for me to be able to comprehend situations that are not in my domain, if you like. And so it's these people who practice this method of being able to go beyond their own name and form and personality trait through this practice of soul consciousness and practice of connecting with God. They find themselves being pulled by, and I think it's to do with their part or a role. They have a specific role to play in our world to bring a dimension that many of us are not able to go to so naturally and easily. So they have this gift, and they can have that communication. that's not confined to this space and time, and they can bring us guidance and understanding that we can use to go somewhere where we need to go for our own benefit and for the benefit of those around us, definitely.
So you're talking about these individuals that have a special capacity, but I'm wondering if this is something that each and every one of us can experience to an extent, possibly not to that same extent.
Right.
And a follow-on question, we're talking about beings of light and being in the light. Is this not just what we refer to as angels?
I think there is a distinction. For me, there is a distinction between these two. One is that, yes, I feel that all of us can have these experiences, but we do need to continue the practice consistently, not whenever I'm in trouble or whenever I feel like it. It really just like you eat, I don't know, how many times a day do you eat? 5, 6, 7 with all the biscuits and snacks and everything that we have? We don't even think about it and we eat. But in order to be able to have this kind of spiritual experience, we have to feed this spiritual consciousness by being aware of it, by being that I am this, and to be able to do this, have this ability to be an observer of what's happening around and separation. And so moving on from attachments and possessiveness and the ego, it's a journey. I'm not saying that I can do it, but it's definitely in my radar that as a way of life, can I let go of my possessiveness and attachment and find myself in this clean space? So I think it's possible for all of us to have those experiences through that practice. And yes, there are some that do have the gift to be able to do that. And then there's this question, so the question between angels and this light, I feel the difference is that angels is actually that pure divine state of every single human being. So every one of us, as we practice and experience ourselves as spiritual beings, then the experience of the angelic state of consciousness is that you are here, you're in the physical domain, and you're doing all the things that human beings might do, but you're free of all the trappings of a human being. And so that for me, and again, it's a state of consciousness, so you can travel through space and time in that consciousness. You can make things happen for other people. You can do things, and you can communicate on a different level. But this aspect of light, I feel, is even more concentrated than that. So this aspect of the self as a being of light, or for all of us again, that I am simply a light, an energy of absolute total peace, love, and joy. And it's not this light, it's not the light that illuminates, it's not the light that kind of creates warmth of that physical nature. But I think earlier Ingrid was relating her experience of it's like your eyes are closed, the room is dark, but you feel you can see. And that ability to be able to see, it's not the physical scene in front of you, but you sense the energy and the vibration to such an extent that you know what's going on. Exactly the same in terms of even foresight. For the future, you may not physically be able to see or have absolute, clear sense, but you have a sense of direction. And I think that's the ability of the soul, this light energy, that again, you can fill the space. All of us right now can fill the space with that light.
I think we're all feeling it. We all came here as human beings, and we're all going to be leaving as angels. So that's a nice going home present, I reckon. Thank you for that, Manda Ben. So Ingrid, I feel in some ways the experiences you've had have been for a purpose. They've been so that you can share them with others and that we can learn to connect to that experience ourselves. But you've very much led your life, certainly in the last 20 plus years, being guided by those beings of light. And I wonder if each of us can tune into that guidance in our own lives and feel a connection and feel a sense of being held. And if so, how do we do that? How do we make that connection and feel that guidance? And could you say a few words about how that guidance has manifested in your life?
Yes. And I want to say something just before that, and is the part of, because when we're too conditioned, we create so many blockages. So something very important in my first experience near death, when I asked to the guidance, I say, why my first near death happened when I was so young? And the answer was incredible. It was because you were old enough to remember, but young enough not to be conditioned yet. So that's so important. We have to remove those layers of conditioning. And to do that, we have to go and remember who we truly are. It's the work of know thyself. It's the work of peeling layers. It's the work of becoming an observer of yourself. And start with, I say, we have a closet that is full of attachments, of so many things. And it's like how we little by little start becoming the observer and taking responsibility to clean our own home. Because sometimes people come to me and they say, I want to talk to beings of light, give me the formula now. And when I said to people, this is the work. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to meditate. That takes too long. Or I don't want to sit there. Oh, that's boring. I cannot do it. So you cannot talk to them. I'm sorry. You have to clean your home first. Because what happens if you're in a disco that is full of noise? If we're in a place with so much noise, I cannot hear you. It's just like, what? And you cannot hear me. So it's like how first we clear the house, lower that volume, go back to silence. The beings of light said to me, wisdom comes from the place of silence. Go back to that place of being able to create a pause, stop. When people say, I don't have time to meditate. I say, what do you do when you're boiling the water for your coffee? What about one conscious breath? That's it. Oh, that? Then another one. Then another pause. What about that one, making your tea? And little by little, you start feeling that sense of, oh, that feels good. What about I start making more of that pause part of my life? And then we start inviting that inner spaciousness, that inner silence. And it's also the recognition of, and I love to use this sentence, what is in the way is the way. And it's like if a challenge comes, in a moment comes, an emotion comes, observe it. Use it to be more present. Even when you're meditating, people say, I'm having too many thoughts. Then use the thoughts to fuel your awareness. I am thinking. Oh. So because I say people, it's not how many times you get lost in thought, but how many times you're being able to come back. So you start also praising yourself. Oh, I'm not so bad. Then little by little is that work. One day I was doing a walking meditation, because if you cannot sit, then walk. And I'm doing this walking meditation, and when you walk, you're supposed to be like paying attention to the birds and the wind and the steps. And one day I came back home and no wind, no steps, no birds. I'm like, whoa. I was trapped in my head. And then it's when what the first thing we do, punish ourselves. I'm not good enough. Look at you. You're spiritual. How could you? But at that moment, I had this incredible realization. It was like, I am aware that I was not aware. And I started to praise my awareness. What about I make it my thing that every time I am aware, I give myself like a little tick mark or so, good job. So the systems start feeling the sense of reward. Oh, this is good. Meditating is a good thing. And you start inviting into your body hormones of well-being, and those hormones of well-being helps you to change the chemistry of your body, and from there you feel good, and the biology also changes. So look what happened at all levels of being. One thing I have to add about the beings of light, because sometimes people get afraid. Oh, what, these beings of light, are not like the devil saying? Very important to know that any being at any level of physical or non-physical reality come to you and say, I am your teacher. I am your master, your guru. I say, run fast. But if any teacher, anyone come to you, any guidance, and guide you to look within, that's the real teacher. Because the guidance has to always be, everything starts here. The beings of light always said to me, don't be concerned for what others do. Not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you start with yourself first. So it's always the guidance. Since I was 5 years old, the beings of light said to me, don't believe what we say. Go within. Practice yourself. Go do it. And that's when you know that that is a true teaching.
I can see you nodding, Manda, and in a way, Ingrid could be giving a class of Raja Yoga meditation. It's exactly the same. Start with yourself, clean your heart, and trust your instinct and your inner knowing.
Absolutely. I mean, before we say anything to anybody else, we have to start with ourselves, look inside. And that's the proof. You know, our words, we're very clever at saying things, but our words only mean something when they're backed with our own experiences and the vibration and the energy of that experience. So absolutely looking at the self. This is something that we do every single day here. That's part of our practice. Every single day to go inside. And part of the practice of soul consciousness is exactly that. To look at, and as you say, what is it that's getting in the way? What gets in the way is what has to get out of the way, and you're the one who's got to take it out of the way. Yeah.
I'm quite keen at this point to bring in another element of your story, which I'm sure you don't mind me sharing because it's in a public video. But I wouldn't want anyone sitting here thinking that, you know, Ingrid had this experience and then lived this kind of, you know, blessed life where she was just in the light and seeing angelic beings, because you didn't have any communication with the beings of light for about 20 years, and you needed to kind of ground the experience and integrate it. And there was one part of your life where your husband took you away from the conflict zone that you were in to the USA. You got married. 3 days later, your husband left for a 7-month tour. You then had your baby, who became quite unwell. You then had issues with your own heart, and you actually hit rock bottom to the point that you began to feel, what is the point in me living, and what is the point in me being here? And you actually contemplated committing suicide. Tell us about that dark place that you were in and what you feel was the purpose of that experience. What did it give you?
A lot. I have to say that those years in which I experienced all that struggle brought me to actually even more depthness, brought me to the place of more empathy, more compassion, more work with myself, more clarity. But what brought me to that depression was the realization that I had walked away from the truth that I was. from my authentic self, and I became very busy, dedicated to the outer, dedicated to my career, dedicated to the things of the daily life, and disconnected from farther and farther and farther from that call, because it was a call. And when I was 19 years old, the beings of light, that call came in an ask. They said, you want to teach? If I wanted to offer these teachings, and I said, no, I don't want to teach anything. I just didn't feel ready. I just didn't feel, because for many, many years I felt that I didn't belong, that I felt like an alien, and I was like, when I went to college, I'm like, I know I want to be like everyone else. And then I have to say that Imagine at the beginning was like for almost, although there was some kind of different kind of sufferings from like sensing of not belonging and all that, for almost 19 years I walked in a room with the lights on. And suddenly it's like the lights went off. So if you're walking in a room with the lights on and all the furniture is there, you don't trip. But the moment you turn off the lights, you're going to trip. So for all those years, things just went really difficult, very hard. And I reached that point that although I was very successful as a marine scientist, I was very empty inside. And then is when I thought about committing suicide, but there was two things that came. One, wait one more day and see what happened. Two, the love that I also felt for my mom was so intense. I just felt I can never make her suffer. And then that night I prayed so deeply. I said, my prayer was not, God, change things. My prayer was, God, please help me see, because I have become blinded. God, help me see, because I cannot see. And what happened the next day was that night I fell asleep and I woke up, and immediately it was the sense of a message. And the message was clear and simple. You need help, go look for a psychologist. But I had it clear. And then I went to Google the name of a doctor, and then I wrote it on a piece of paper. That very day at the cafeteria of my job, I was still at NASA, somebody came to talk to me about her daughter having problems, and that her daughter was seeing certain doctor. It was the same one I have written on the paper. And then another person came and gave me the name of the same doctor. I'm like, come on. It's clear. I went to see that doctor. And what happened was something really incredible, and is that this person was very spiritual. Reason why I was guided to this doctor, and I was able to feel safe. And I was able to talk with this doctor, and at some point he told me to write a list of sufferings. And then, I did the writing of the sufferings. We read the list together, and then when he read the list, he's like, in my 37 years of career, I have never met someone that has suffered this much and is mentally stable. And of course, I went into tears, and the first question I asked, why me? Why this is happening to me? And the answer was perfect. The answer was what? Turn on the light back. He said, why not? And at that moment, he started to say, look, thanks to this, you have done this. Thanks to this, that, thanks to... And I started to see purpose behind all my experiences. And I have to say that 3 miracles happened that day. The first one was the realization that nothing ever happened to me. It happened for me. It's like, thanks to this and this and this and this and this and that, now I can be sitting in this chair in this state of awareness and clarity and openness and gratitude. The other miracle was that I was sitting in front of that doctor, and that was my only truth. Nothing else was happening. Everything was in my head, and I could do whatever I wanted with it. It was that sense of empowerment, like, oh, I can do whatever I want with what is here. And the third miracle was forgiveness. But it's the kind of forgiveness that brings you to the true meaning of forgiveness. And it was that there was nothing to forgive because nothing ever happened to me. So I could say two things. There was nothing to forgive or everything was forgiven. And then after that, it's like that door that I have closed open, and driving in my car, I had experience of the light again, and the reconnection with the beings of light happened. So, yes.
Manda, I'm sure there's going to be people in this room who recognize what it feels like to be in these negative states. And it often is the case that before people embark on a spiritual journey, they do have a challenge in their life, or they have a time of feeling lost. But many people also feel a sense of pointlessness to their life, you know. What is this all for? I mean, we each of us have our own reason and story as to why we begin on a quest. But from the 30-odd years that you've seen, do you recognize this pattern of there being something that happens in someone's life that comes before the quest to find spiritual meaning?
Yes, definitely. It is something that happens. For some people, something significant like that happens. For some people, it is a calling. And Neville, many people know Neville here. And Neville often says, he compares his story with mine. And for me, it was a calling in the beginning. And I would say it was, but I also looked in the mirror and I thought, is this really me? There's got to be more to me than just this. There was that awareness as well. But I think that actually this aspect of pointlessness, or this aspect of life becoming mundane, is very hard. And when we're trapped in it, we don't realize it, because that's what life is. But it's only when you start to kind of think that your life has to have more meaning. And I have to say, even on a spiritual journey, I've been through phases where I think, when I've allowed while I may not externally be doing ordinary things, but my mind has become ordinary. And when my mind becomes ordinary, then I think, what am I doing? This sense of emptiness that comes inside of us. And I feel that all of us go through those phases. But when that does come, I have to take the bull by the horn. And at that time, I've got to reach out, I've got to find a way to pull myself out of it. But yes, there are a lot of people, I feel, nowadays particularly, more than ever before. But some, they just carry on. The next day, everything is okay, so then we carry on. But actually, really, my sense is that time is calling for all of us to be on that journey whereby we've got to make a difference in our world. We've got to, as we've been talking all day today about this collectiveness that we've got to create. Doesn't matter culture, religion, faith, profession, financial status, whatever. We're all spiritual beings. We're all lights, and we've got to come together from that place to see what's happening in the world and make a difference. And when we take that decision or make that choice, we also begin to see the beauty and the truth that lies inside ourselves. And so that in itself can become guidance. But yeah, my sense is that many today are feeling like that.
And would you, Ingrid, put these individual experiences into a kind of a collective experience? That there is some kind of awakening that is happening for humanity now, and people are feeling these stirrings, and actually a shift is underway.
Yes, and I think people are getting fed up. And I think this has to happen. For us to awaken, something has to shake us pretty hard, to the point that we move. We say, and we start asking the questions to ourselves, what is this for? What am I doing here? Why this? And those questions are very important, because it's the moment when we just move out of the couch. I just say that when we're trapped in the narrative of our mind, I call it the cul-de-sac of suffering. Me and poor me, we become victims. And when people talk about free will, and they said that they have free will because they choose the clothes that they wear, or the career that they study, or the food that they eat, I said, that's not free will. You're already conditioned by your culture, or you will not be wearing those clothes or eating that food or picking that career. I said the true free will is when you put in your power, your wisdom, to bring the light into a situation. Say, what is this for? What is this trying to show me? What is the purpose of this? And then you leave that narrative of poor me and take that path of clarity. That's why it's called the light of awareness. You bring light, you call for the light to get clarity. So yes, more and more and more people are starting to realize all this war, all these differences, and many young people are feeling this life is boring. What is all this stuff for? So it's like, how can we just now use that, shaking that calling to look within? Yeah.
And of course, we just had this recent phenomenon of the aurora, which so many people have, experienced and felt really moved by, and has led them to wonder what is going on. I've got more questions for you, but I'm going to just pause there and just see whether there are any questions in the room that anyone would like to ask. I think there's a roving mic, which Mark has got, and he'll bring it to you. So one just here. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, Ingrid, during those wilderness years, that disconnected period, did you feel that perhaps a slight advantage over others around with spiritual knowledge that you gained? So did you feel that you had through that wilderness, you had to go through that pain and that suffering to perhaps find another pathway, or maybe just a bit more empathy, so you understood in the physical realm rather than just in the spiritual realm? Do you know what I mean? It's a case of, doctor, heal thyself, or walk the talk.
Definitely, yes. Thank you for that question, and I understand, your question, and definitely I needed to ground, and I needed to, there was even a moment that I think I became kind of a little bit arrogant before that, because it was that feeling of like, what is happening to these people? Oh, but what happened when you also forget who you are and you get distracted? And it's very easy to get distracted and realize, whoa, this could happen to anybody. And then, yes, my sense of empathy and compassion and openness and care, was expanded. And, it was so important, even living in a war zone, even being with people with PTSD, with depression, dealing with my own depression was, I know how it feels. I know how it feels. So now that's the work I do. I'm able to work with people and know and have the sense of, I know where you are at. Let's work it together. And also do the work with myself. I have dedicated the past 15 years to work with my own traumas, with my own awakening, with my own cleaning of my own closet, to say it like that. And yes, it's been a process. And now all the things that have worked, I'm able to share and help others. So very important.
Thank you for that question. I love the phrase, the wilderness years. We haven't mentioned, I think there's another question here, but we haven't mentioned your other two near-death experiences. You had a motorbike accident and had another one, and you had some surgery. And before the surgery, you had a sense that something might happen, and it did. Were there any aspects of these experiences that taught you something further that the first one hadn't? What do you see as being the purpose of those other experiences?
In a nutshell, to not take too long, the first one, or the second one, the one in the motorcycle, was very important in the sense that when people nowadays come and ask me if their loved ones suffer when they died in a tragic accident, I can bring that clarity of, in my experience and the experience of many others that have had this sort of near-death experiences, there is not pain. Even before the motorcycle fell, I was already out of the body. And the pain belongs to the nervous system, to the body. Unless, we were talking about that today, the person is too attached to the physical, to the material, then he's going to have the sense of pain because it stays in the emotional and the mental body. So that's why it's also so important to do the work. So we start realizing I'm not the body. So when I had the motorcycle accident, it was, like I said, before the bike fell, I'm already standing in the middle of the road and in the light and feeling the sense of being at home again. No pain, no fear whatsoever. That was the thing that was the most mesmerizing, like there is no pain. There is no fear, there is none of that. That for the first experience, from the two, the last one, very, very important, very revealing. Because although I had that big awakening with the doctor, all that, still in my heart was always lingering that sense of I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home. Why was I kicked out? 2 times. I'm like, oh gosh, what did I do? Then now it came the answer. So like you say, I knew something was going to happen. I was guided to the right doctor that was going to listen. And I told her, you have to monitor my blood pressure. I was so on it that she called the anesthesiologist, okay. And they were doing that, and during the surgery, my blood pressure dropped, and I went into hypothermia. And when this is happening, this was the first time that I was asked if I wanted to stay or I wanted to go. The other 2 times, not even asked. It was like, you're back. This time I was asked, and it was surprising because many experiences is more like, you're not ready, you have to go back. In this experience now, when I was asked, you want to stay? I felt, of course I want to stay. It's home. And that's why we actually use the word heaven, is heaven. Like, of course I want to stay. Whoa. Then I heard the words, oh, you want to go back. Oh. Since I have been practicing presence, meditation, awareness for so long, I think that's what helped in this experience, because the moment I hear this, and this is also revealed to me the meaning of temptation. Because of course the ego mind wants to stay where it feels good, of course. But at that moment I said, wait a minute, is this a test? Then I started to have the realization, if God, the Father, the light, consciousness, is everything there is. So where is here and where is there? If God is everywhere and is everything, There is no here and there is not there. And at that very moment, the only thing after that crossed my mind was, keep me where I can serve God the most. And up to that moment, that I was in the state of complete and absolute presence, I did not have any attachment. Although I adore my son, my husband, all that, I did not feel any attachment to anything. It was that sense of, if I leave or if I stay or not is irrelevant. It was the sense that whatever happened, it was all organized in perfect order. Everything was going to be okay. So I didn't need to worry about anything. But the moment I said, keep me where I can serve God the most, my son, my husband, my family, I needed like a kind of anchor. And then I was back. But this is when that profound realization of course, home is not a place, it's a state of being. And it's when I also started to think, it's not about near-death experience, it's about near-life experience. How I use this and this experience of being human and contrast and all of this to wake up. And then there was a beautiful analogy the beings of light shared with me about this state of home. They said, imagine that you go to an amusement park and you put those VR or these virtual reality goggles. And you're with your virtual reality and you go up and down and left and right and everywhere and you feel things. And you remove these goggles and you realize you never went anywhere. You always have been home. We just have to remember it. Yes.
So nice. I love the idea that we're all having a near-life experience. Was there another question that anyone wanted to ask?
Well, I could ask one.
Yeah.
Ingrid, it's been very moving what you've been saying. Thank you very much. And you're able to see beings of light, but have you ever communicated with humans, maybe that you know or don't know, that have moved on into another state of being?
Yes, I have. So I started to see what we call spirits since I was 6 years old. And when I saw, but I don't know if it's too long, but when I saw the first spirit, it caused me a lot of fear. And I was petrified in fear. And then that very day, I already knew that my mom could see spirits too. So that was, my mom validated my experiences because she confessed to me that she could see spirits too. And then that day that I had that encounter, I went to my mom and I said, no, Mom, the spirits and the beings of light are not the same. And then my mom started to ask me, now I have enough words to explain because I was 6 years old. And she's like, then what is it that you see? Because she thought we were seeing the same thing. And when I explained, she started to cry. And she's like, I think that you see angels. And it's when I looked at her and like, Mom, I don't think so because they don't have wings. So, and then my mom said, they have to be, because she was raised as Catholic, she didn't know anything different, so it has to be your guardian angels. And because I already been communicating with the beings of light for a while, then I asked them. So first I asked the question, what is with these dark spirits? I call them dark just because they cause me fear, not because they were nothing bad. So the answer was, I thought the answer was going to be, yeah, they are different. It was incredible. The answer was that you call spirits. You, us. In essence, we're all the same. The difference is how aware you are about who you truly are. And when you're not aware of who you are, you vibrate lower. And when you're too attached to the matters of this world, then now you even vibrate lower. And then your appearance seems like it's darkened. But it's because your light has been covered. You just really, really occupy with something else. Then I asked the other question. I said, my mom said that you are angels. Is that what you are? And the answer was incredible. They say, we are what you want us to be. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Last question. Yeah, thank you.
Be quick. Thank you very much for the talk. I've got immense thank you, Sister Manda, for talk. Can you see the day? Obviously, you're just going to do a simple degree in PhD in physics, quantum physics, eh?
Quantum physics.
Can you see the day where then there's a marriage between quantum physics and spirituality in this in the level of the micro world, which is already being explored?
What a great question. Do you see the day when there's going to be a real marriage between quantum physics and spirituality?
I think they are already using things like quantum physics and neurology, neuroscience to explain spirituality. So it's already happening. Yes. So it's like, how can we put this in words that science accepts? But I think it's happening. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I also think, Mark? Yes, definitely. I think that marriage already exists, in fact. And there is so much work that's happening in the field of quantum physics whereby they are actually expressing this interconnectedness and this marriage, as you put it, so beautifully. And scientists are actually proving this too. So definitely, and when Ingrid and I were sitting earlier on, I said, can you bring some, I said, all the things that you're saying sounding so much like the things that we talk about, can you bring some elements of science and this kind of thing in it so that perhaps people can have a different angle or a perspective? And so she just said that, okay, that's not directly my field, but all of these things are very much just connected. And that actually you put it quite nicely, that this in itself is a science. Spirituality in itself is a science, in that when you work with it and experience it and research it, you actually come to some incredible incredible outcomes and results that just may not be quantifiable by someone else's methodology, but you can quantify them by your own experience, and there's nothing greater than your own experience. You need to prove nothing to anybody once you have an experience.
You've queued up the meditation very nicely there. Because there is nothing quite like experience, and we've been taken on such a journey in actually quite a short space of time. You're probably all feeling like you need to go away and lie down in a darkened room with a cold flannel on your forehead and think very deeply for a very long time. But before you go and do that, can we have an experience of what it is that we've been talking about? I don't know, we could try an experiment here, Ingrid, if you could just cue in the meditation with just a sharing from you of what you feel in that dimension of light and how you experience that and what it is to you. And then Sister Manda, if you could then guide us with your thoughts in a meditation, we can all join in together. Is that all right? Yeah.
In this connection with the light, is that silence, that pause, that sense of being at home that sense of feeling warm and connected and open and expansive, joyful, vibrant. The sense of not feeling lost, but embrace and whole and love. The sense of belonging, the sense of sharing, the sense of bringing that joy and being an instrument of service, so all of us can join together. I always say, one candle alone can flicker in the wind and even sometimes be blown away, but many candles joining together form a big flame, and that big flame cannot be put off. Let's be part of that flame.
As I become aware of this bigger flame of connectedness with all souls, I become increasingly aware of my own sense of light of myself. I am the light that is centered inside my physical body, at the center of the forehead. The more I become conscious and awake to this awareness, my attention becomes focused in this state of being. I am the light of peace, the light of love, a pure energy of joy, separate from this physical body, a sense of being light as in weightless, being free from the heaviness of matter. But it's this sense of lightness, of weightlessness, that brings the emotions and feelings of light, of joy, of moving on, of moving boundless and not being tied, and yet still connected, knowing that the vibration and the energy of my thoughts and feelings have a ripple effect on not just on my immediate environment, but far into the distance. Because I too am in perfect image of God, the unconditional, pure presence of love. And I can get the vastness of that being, the beauty of the sweetest, unconditional love, soft, gentle presence, but vast. And all of us can be embraced by that vibration and that energy of unconditional love. My heart too then becomes as expansive as the heart of the being of God. Crossing all boundaries and limitations, and open to all. Om Shanti. I am the essence of peace.
Thank you so much, Sister Manda and Dr. Ingrid Honkala. You did a double act there so beautifully, and you've shared so deeply, both of you, from your hearts. There's not a heart here, I'm sure, that hasn't really been touched by what you've shared. Should we just show our appreciation with a silent clap, wiggling of the fingers? Thank you so much. Really, really wonderful. And actually, Ingrid is on a little bit of a tour. And if you're in London at all on Thursday evening, Ingrid is going to be at our international headquarters, which are in London, Global Cooperation House, on Thursday evening, with Sister Genti, who's the director for Europe and the Middle East for the Brahma Kumaris, is going to be sharing the stage with Ingrid on Thursday. But we would very much love to see you back here again if you're near enough to come to any event here. And this house really is here to really help people connect with that light that Ingrid has been talking about, and find a practice that can sustain and support each and every one of you in your daily lives. So events coming up, we're going to have on Saturday the 18th, which is this coming Saturday, some forest bathing, which sounds very intriguing. That's 2:00 in the afternoon if you fancy some forest bathing. And then next Tuesday, is it every Tuesday you have a lecture here? Every other Tuesday. So 21st of May, next Tuesday, we have a lecture here, When Your Heart's Not in It. And that's with Natalie Steele from Loughborough. And then the following Saturday, the 25th of May, we have a one-day retreat experience here in this house. And it's called Experience Soul Consciousness. And that's a one-day retreat from 10:30 until 4:00. Information on that and the other events you can find on the website for this house, globalretreatcenter.org. So do sign up for being kept informed of events that are happening. I will just mention that the bookshop downstairs is going to be open for a little while as you leave. If you would like to take a little book of inspiration home with you this evening, and to get to that, go down to reception and they'll guide you from there. It's basically through what we call the exhibition room, and then through some double doors and along the corridor, and you'll see it just there on the right. And also Ingrid has got some copies of her book, if you would like to read her full story. She's going to just be in the room, which is through these doors here, immediately after our time together, and she can, I think you're signing the books, Ingrid, and you can buy a copy of the book as well. But we really hope you've enjoyed this evening, you've had some food for thought, and that you will come back very soon and we can continue the journey together. But for now, thank you so much for coming. Take good care, good night, and goodbye.
Thank you.
All these feelings and all these faces and open doors when everyone else seems so serene, and I just feel so insecure. And where do I go when all the pieces of my heart lay on the floor? You say, come into the light, why don't you come into the light?